Thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to say a big thank you to the organizers of Ghiscon and for giving me the opportunity again to be on this platform to discuss issues with all of us. Today I'm here to talk on the theme safety, workplace safety, using technology to mitigate the impact of a pandemic. And the presentation will flow in this order. I'll give a fair introduction, talk about the new normal that we find ourselves, talk about the role of technology in the safety of the workplace. Then I will stress on some few factors that we'll have to consider when we want to introduce some of these technologies in our work areas. And then finally, I'll bring my presentation to a close. So it is going to be very short, very short, I promise. Now we all know what the pandemic, which was caused by the coronavirus, did not only to Ghana but to the entire world. A survey done by Deloitte in China amongst 1,000 respondents from different organizations and industry showed that the pandemic did not only impact the performance of and the cash flow of organizations, but also posed a high risk in the safety of employees at the workplace, for which reason most employees, even up till now, wouldn't want to go back to the work site, would prefer to work in the house. Another survey that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2020 in UK among 1,500 workers showed that only 13% of these people wanted to go back to the workplace. Only 13 people, what percent wanted to go back to the workplace and work as we used to. Over 50% wanted to do the hybrid way of working, that is working partly from the house and partly from the work office. Now, even that, those who wanted to, even with the hybrid system, people wanted to spend a maximum of just 3 days at the working area. That showed how fearful we are as human beings. We didn't want to go back to the work area. We want to spend just some few time at the work area, and then we want to stay in the comfort of our homes and then do our work. Now, for this reason, we see that there is the need for us as humans to now psych our mind into the new era that we find ourselves, which we call the new normal. Now, in the new normal, a survey that was done also in 2020 showed that between 2019 and 2020, employees who wanted to work from their house shot up from 11% to 48%. From 11% to 48%. How are we going to entice these employees to come back to the working area? There is a need to think outside the box. Now, for this reason, the World Health Organization also instructed or mandated employers that employers, in consultation with their employees and their representatives, must find ways and implement measures that will prevent and mitigate the pandemic at the workplace through engineering, administrative controls, and provide PPEs according to risk assessment. So we see engineering has a major role to play in the era we find ourselves now. Engineering has a major role in the era we find ourselves now. We now ask ourselves if we are going to, because World Health Organization is stressing on the fact that employers should use engineering, administrative, and then PPEs to control this pandemic at the working areas. We are providing them the PPEs. We have the signages and the warnings, which are the administrative measures. What are the engineering things we are going to do actually to mitigate or to prevent this pandemic in the working area? It is a question that is actually hitting minds. The question that many employers are actually battling with. Now, Steve Jobs, before his death in 2011, said that the biggest innovation of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. Before 2011, this man said this: the biggest innovation of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. Biology refers to human beings and our interaction. Cannot solve technology now, and what we ought to do now in the workplace to make it a bit safer, to entice employees now to come in, is to implement technology, to attract them with technology, to bring them back to the working area. Now, there are lots of technologies that have been implemented today. Sometimes we might say we don't have them in Ghana, but just bear in mind that the COVID-19 did not also start in Ghana. It started from Asia, then to Europe, to America, then eventually it ended up in Africa. And so some of these technologies currently might not be in Ghana, but I believe that eventually they must get to Ghana and to Africa. And so we must have a brief idea of what is actually happening in the world. I'll just talk about just some few of them, about 5 of these technologies, and then close. Now, the number one I want to talk about is the adoption of home working technologies such as Zoom and Microsoft Teams. Now, Zoom, for instance, was invented or was developed in 2013. 2013, most of us did not know about Zoom. They had no popularity. But from 2019 and 2020, the demand for Zoom shot up. In 2019 alone, Zoom recorded a maximum daily participation of 10 million, a daily participation of 10 million participants. In 2020, it had increased. In 2020, it had increased to 300 million participants per day, Zoom alone. Now, before recently, Ghiscon, this conference you and I are attending, it was done in person. We would gather at the Western Plaza Hotel and then have this conference. And today we see ourselves now using this technology. So technology, as Steve Jobs said, is gradually eating into our system, and then we must also buy into it. The next technology that is also gaining ground is the use of smart buildings. The use of smart buildings. The use of smart buildings. Hitherto, before the pandemic, most organizations thought that spending organizational funds on smart buildings or smart offices was a waste of resources, as though people were not actually spending funds on that. Now, a recent survey that was done in Europe in 2020 showed that even amongst European business decision makers, it showed that 48% of decision makers are now ready to invest into smart buildings. Now, these smart buildings or smart offices, they use infrared sensors, automated devices, so that sometimes just by the presence of your shadow, your shadow alone allows a door to open, a gate. It opens a gate. Some of these smart offices use HVAC technologies. These HVAC technologies are able to purify the air circulating in offices. Some of these smart offices also have sensors that are able to control the occupancy in an office, so that if the number in an office is increasing, it is able to raise an alarm to show that there is so much people in the office, and therefore some must walk out of the office. So businesses are now going into automation. 76% in a survey that was also performed, 76% of companies are now ready to invest into Internet of Things. That is automation. 76% of companies are now ready to invest into Internet of Things. Now, the third technology that I will talk about is the thermal imaging system. Sometimes we call this system the fever screening system. I remember during the days of Ebola, these systems were predominant in our airports. But now it is not just at our airports, but it's also found even at the wet areas and sites with different temperatures. Slight, because we know that the COVID, one of the symptoms of the COVID is high temperature. So this thermal imaging system is able to pick slight difference in temperatures, and therefore once it picks up, there are people set aside who can pick such employees or visitors and question them, do further investigation to know whether they have the COVID or not. In 2020, in the thermal imaging industry, recorded a massive 700% increase in technology. So we see it might not be predominant in Africa or even in Ghana, but then elsewhere it is, and gradually it is getting to Africa. The fourth technology I would want to talk about has to do with the automated entrances. You and I know that viruses are able to stay longer or survive on doorknobs and then on hot surfaces. Now, what employers are doing now is to try to cut off some of these things. Entering offices, they are trying to prevent you from using the door knobs to enter offices. What most employers are now introducing is the scanning of QR codes on sensors. By so doing, you have entry into an office. I realize that even in my current organization, before the COVID, the employees use their fingerprints for their clocking in and clocking out. But after COVID, we are no more using our fingers. We are using our company ID cards. Just by bringing the company ID card closer to the clocking system, it is able to register you and give you access, whether in and out. And so companies are also investing into such things. The last technology I will talk about is the increase in the use of collaborative robots. the use of collaborative robots, which are also called cobots. Now, most organizations, now we are talking about social distancing. There is a need for us also to manufacture. We can bring almost all our operators, especially in the manufacturing industry. We can bring almost all the operators to the system. There is a need to increase productivity, to increase production. How do we go about it? Companies are now using these cobots. They are highly productive, very smart, and everything. And so, by the introduction of them, we are able to do the social distancing. We are able to do social distancing in our working areas, and the use of cobots is also increasing. A survey that was done showed that in 2020 alone, the demand for cobalt increased to $981 million. And it is estimated that in 2026, the demand is going to increase to $972 million. So we see that every technology is gradually increasing in our system. Technology is gradually increasing in our system. Now, I want to talk about some of the factors to consider in implementing some of these. Sorry, my slide did not capture that, but then I will talk about some of the factors that we'll have to consider. Knowing very well, change is the only constant in human life. But the human as we are, we always resist change. We are adamant to change. And so before we actually introduce some of these technologies in our working areas, there are basically three factors that we will have to take into consideration. Number one that we'll have to look at is the response of our employees to these technologies. That is to say that we'll have to consider the literacy level of our employees. There are some employees that are not technologically inclined, but before you can actually get them into the technology you want to introduce, you must give them enough training, enough education, and psych their mind into it. It is not a one-day stuff. It is going to take a period of time. The number two factor that we'll also have to look at is the type of industry, that we want to introduce the technology, the type of industry. In example, to say in a service company or a service organization, they are not probably into production. Let me see. It's just an example I want to give. It might not be accurate, so they are not into production. Then you introduce this cobot in such an organization. We've made it. So you must also understand your organization and then know the type of technology that you are going to introduce. To consider. The last factor that we also have to consider is the existence of a supportive culture. Management first must buy into it. There are some organizations, the management will just introduce it, but then majority of them are not in support of it. So there should be a supportive culture of such technologies that we introduce. In conclusion, I would say that also my factors were even here. The factors I talked about were on my slide. Sorry for that. In conclusion, I would say that in this new normal that we find ourselves, we must think creative. to make the work area safe, to entice employees to come back to work. Now, there is something that Albert Einstein said something. The famous scientist said that one thing he fears is the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. I wouldn't want to continue. Probably it is our homework. Next year when we meet at Ghiscon again, I believe that I will collect a continuation of this adage. I wouldn't want to continue this adage. But Einstein said that one thing he fears is the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. And I believe that that day is here with us. That day is here with us. Humans as we are now, we are not able to survive now without technology. Even when we consider our mobile phone, people are not even able to survive without the mobile phone. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, so the floor is open for questions.
CFAO, your car, we care.